Good evening. I'm Rachel Maddow in for Keith Olbermann. This is Friday, July 11th, 116 days until the 2008 presidential election. And if the election were a football game, it appears that Senator John McCain just ran the ball into his own end zone. Our fifth story on the countdown, McCain tells a Pittsburgh television station that he recited the names of the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line while under interrogation in North Vietnam. One problem with that remarkable anecdote? Every other time McCain has told that story, he's named the Green Bay Packers instead. Unnecessary pander, 10 yards. Ahead, we'll have political analysis from Richard Wolff, and we'll go to the go-to guy you always want to go to when politics and sports combine. Someone who also knows a thing or two about Countdown. Someone who is perhaps hoping to have the entire day off. But first, tonight, the details. The candidate who supposedly isn't comfortable talking about his military record brings it up unprompted yet again. In an interview with station KDKA in Pittsburgh, McCain raised the subject himself in response to the incredibly innocuous question, quote, "When you think of Pittsburgh, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?"
I'd like to thank
Senator, when you think of Pittsburgh, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
the Steelers. When I was first interrogated and really had to give some information because of the pressures, the physical pressures that were on me, I named the starting lineup, the defensive line of the Pittsburgh Steelers as my squadron mates.
Did you really?
Yeah, that years ago, yeah.
In your POW camp?
Yes, yes indeed. Yeah.
Could you do it today?
No, unfortunately I couldn't, but I certainly could then.
Problem number one, the famous Steelers defensive line to which McCain was trying to refer, Mean Joe Green, L.C. Greenwood, they didn't become famous until McCain was out of Vietnam. Problem two, as we mentioned, he's told this tale before, notably in his book, Faith of My Fathers. On page 194, and I quote, "Pressed for more useful information, I gave the names of the Green Bay Packers offensive line and said they were members of my squadron." The anecdote was also dramatized for the TV movie version of the book.
Starr, Greg, McGee, Davis, Adderley, Brown, Ringo, Wood.
10 points, McCain.
Ray Nitschke, Arceo.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Get some rest.
No rest tonight for MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff, senior White House correspondent for Newsweek magazine. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Rachel.
The McCain campaign is claiming that the Steelers story is an honest mistake. One of many, it would seem. So our choices here would appear to be A, Senator McCain's memory is so bad he can no longer be counted on to remember much of anything, or B, he will say pretty much anything to be president, even pander on the very issue that's supposed to define him, the years that he spent in a prisoner of war camp. Which one of those options is more politically palatable here?
I'm not sure what is palatable anymore in a week where we've had wall-to-wall coverage of Jesse Jackson threatening to cut off the extremities of Barack Obama. What we're seeing here, I think, may be a memory problem. I somehow doubt it. I think this is another sign of the overexploitation of this compelling story, this compelling piece of John McCain's life story. And the problem is that the more you repeat this stuff, and where you repeat it in error and in excess, the less powerful that becomes. I mean, the reason in 2000 his aides said he wasn't trying to talk about his life story even when he was because they knew it was somehow precious and to be brought out when they really needed it. The problem about bringing it out every time is that it's no longer powerful.
And on that issue of the power of this particular anecdote about giving the names of the Green Bay Packers, this was the anecdote McCain would cite as evidence for why torture doesn't work. He would say, look, I know from firsthand experience it produces false confessions. McCain reversed himself on the issue of torture. Back in February, he voted against a bill that would have banned the CIA from using waterboarding as an interrogation tactic. Does this anecdote, whether it was botched unintentionally or intentionally, does that have the potential of even reviving the torture flip-flop for him?
I'm not sure this anecdote does in and of itself, but I think that torture and McCain's position on torture ought to be a very relevant area of debate in this campaign. partly because he's raising it so often in what seems like every TV ad, but also because it's not just a historical issue, of course, because what we're learning every day is how the Bush administration adopted torture techniques as part of their standard operating procedure. That makes it very relevant, not just as a campaign issue looking backwards, but also moving forwards for the next president. So it is relevant what his position is, why he thought there should be some sort of exemption for the CIA.
Richard, one of the great intangibles on which elections turn is the authenticity of a candidate. That's what the whole Maverick thing is about. That's what you get the lifestyle photo ops of the candidates. Authenticity seems to me to be really, really hard to generate in the minds of voters and really hard to recreate if you lose it. Do you think that John McCain is losing that sense of authenticity for voters?
Well, certainly this kind of incident speaks to that kind of issue. I mean, to mistake a certain part of your life story is one thing, but this is a key, critical moment that he has repeated many times before. And to get it wrong in this way does raise questions about the very essence of his brand. I mean, if you're going to put straight talk on your plane and your bus, then you cannot afford to be caught in anything less than straight talk.
Richard, it may be months too early to say if this will cost McCain with Pennsylvania voters, but isn't this exactly the kind of thing that could cost him with Pennsylvania voters, especially with so-called low information voters? Even if they're low on information about other issues, low information voters might not be low on information about football, right?
Right, absolutely. This is where the campaigns are really battling it out here. And what does it say about how he thinks about Green Bay and Wisconsin? You know, there are cues here in what people are tuning into. And you know, the only limiting factor here is how it's been covered. I'm really surprised that so far this has got very little debate and has been reduced to something of a blog item.
I agree. Richard Wolff of MSNBC and Newsweek, thank you and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Rachel.